Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another newsletter recap. Of course, if you prefer reading, you can check out my Substack and read this entire issue by clicking the link in the description. I was traveling a bit last week, so I wasn't able to record this issue, but here we go. So today we're going to talk about the Map of Consciousness and Week 42 updates. The Map of Consciousness, which I'll pull up right here, is from a book called Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins. Basically, through all his research and millions of studies, Dr. Hawkins and his team was able to create a map that quantitatively places a level of consciousness that you're in, and according to each level of consciousness coincides a specific emotion that you're operating at. For example, if we look at the bottom of this map, we have an energetic log of 20, and that's associated with shame, while at the very top, which is 700 to 1000, that's associated with enlightenment. Before we get into this map in general, we're not going to talk about all those steps. We're mainly going to talk about a specific section in the middle. But if you just look at this map, you can now just see where you're at just by feeling what you're operating at emotionally, and you can look at where you want to go, and you can now see how much farther you have to go in terms of levels of consciousness and energetic log. I'll admit, when I first went over this, I was a bit iffy, but after getting more details about it and having an open mind, it really does make a lot of sense. So throughout his research, Dr. Hawkins found that the majority of the population operates from an energetic log of 100 to 150. That means they're operating on a consciousness level of fear, anger, or desire. And if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense, right? Considering our prehistoric DNA within our reptile brain, our ancestors were operating on survival too. You know, they had to run from saber-toothed tigers and T-Rexes and all that, but that DNA is still hardwired into our brain. So it's just a different day, same shit, different environment. But here's where it gets interesting. At a energetic log of 200, that's the consciousness level of courage. When people reach this consciousness level, that's when they start to have significant changes in their life and mentality. So if we do some elementary school math, if we take the average of the majority of the population, that means mostly everyone has to move up 50 to 100 points to reach the level of courage. But here's the problem. In Dr. Hawkins' research, he found that throughout an entire lifetime, the average person only moves up 5 points. So they never reach the level of courage, nor do they see any significant changes in their life. With that being said, how do we move up this map of consciousness? Well, the easiest way is to practice the consciousness levels that are at courage or above it. So doing courageous acts, we have neutrality, willingness, and acceptance. Those are associated with the emotions of forgiveness, optimism, trust, and affirmation. Those are just simple mindset shifts and shifts in perspective. It's free and everyone can do it. But if we think about it, it makes sense that courage is the level where you start seeing changes, right? Let's say you're trying to build a business. You need some courage. It takes some balls to quit your job or to pursue something that you've never done before. But it just doesn't end at one act of courage. If you want to keep leveling up, it requires more and more courage. Just some people don't want to take the extra steps of courage to get to the next level. How many times have you seen a friend or another business owner say, when they're comparing themselves to other businesses or their competitors, it's always like, I don't know how X and Y is making so much more money because I'm so much better at this. And that's always the default programming, right? To place the burden of responsibility on skill. And look, I'm a huge advocate of mastery. I think if you pursue any skill, you should at least attempt to master it. But you also have to understand that the path to mastery is a slow and treacherous one. And actually, in terms of lifestyle and revenue wise, the path of courage is actually the easiest one. Here's why. When I'm explaining to students, mentees, or other business owners who are playing this comparison game, which is unwinnable, by the way, so you should just not play that game at all, I usually explain that it usually comes down to 3 different areas where they're lacking, and the foundation of each of those 3 areas just happen to be courage. The first area is marketing and outreach. So let's say we have 2 business owners. One of them is not afraid to post about their business and sell themselves. They're slowly and surely building up their personal brand every single day day. They're not afraid to reach out to potential clients that, might seem out of their league, but they do it anyway. Meanwhile, the other person, they think they have to work and master their skill so they can reach this level of worthiness to get their clients. And in the meantime, they're not doing any form of selling themselves. So obviously, the person who's trying to do marketing and outreach is going to get more traction business-wise than the person who's not doing anything. The next area is pricing. So it takes a lot of guts to charge a high ticket price. I know I went through this mindset shift myself, and I've taught other people to do it too. But it's funny because I've seen a lot of talented people who believe that they're in the top 1% or so in their market for their skill, yet they're always fighting about price with clients. So why is that? I think the reason why is because their mind is so focused on getting business, getting the client, than actually valuing their own skill. Because if they actually valued their own skill, they would know how to price it. But the act of valuing your own skill and charging a higher price for it takes what? It takes courage. And the last and final area that I want to talk about is complementary skills. It takes courage to learn something new, right? And when we get so good at a certain skill, we really don't want to learn anything else. I know I was this way with copywriting, and when I added complementary skills to my copywriting, that's when everything changed for me. When I first started as a copywriter, I was working for $15 an hour, and I just thought in my head that I just needed to get better at copy, and that's how I'll be able to raise my prices. Well, I found an even easier way, because I realized that if you just wanted someone to write words, there are plenty of people on Upwork and Fiverr who could possibly be better writers than me that are charging way less than $15 an hour, honestly. So I started to add complementary skills on top of copywriting, and the skills that I sharpened were messaging, offer creation, and positioning. And that enhanced not only the work that I was able to do, but also enhanced the results that I was able to get for clients, and accordingly enhanced the prices that I was able to charge. Now, back when I was doing copywriting full time, I stopped doing hourly pricing, but if I were to take the average amount of time that I spent on projects with what I charged, it was about $450 to $600 an hour. So a 30 to 40 times increase in my prices from when I first started. And that's all because I had the guts to learn complementary skills. I wasn't afraid to learn new things. Now, on a less serious note, I have an example of this in another area that applies to this as well. So I have a friend who's been obsessed with this specific girl since high school. He's always been afraid to talk with her, and he's made some attempts to, but it never went anywhere because he never escalated anything. And it's funny because he always felt like he was lacking some things. He told me and a group of friends, I'm not kidding, that before he can ask her out on a proper date, he needed to get better at his skill, which is programming, become rich, and get a nicer car. Funny thing is, all of those things have happened on some level, maybe not to the maximum level that he was imagining in his head, but he did get better at his skill. He's gotten paid better for it. He got a promotion, and he bought a new car. Yet he's made no attempts to ask her out or pursue a conversation. And I told him he could be the next Gatsby for all I care. He can continue stacking on his wealth, get a nicer car, become way better at his skill, but he still lacked the thing that will allow him to take this to the next step. Of course, I'm making myself accountable for this too. I'm flying out to Vegas in July to go meet some potential clients in person rather than doing my usual of cold email and cold DMing. It's time to stop hiding behind a computer screen and time to start shaking hands. When I first saw this, it literally made me want to hide because I'm naturally an introvert. I'm slowly but surely breaking out of my shell, and the thought of traveling alone to go pitch people that I've never met before, it was terrifying. But you know what? If I reflect back on my life and how I've gotten here, the biggest leaps that have leveled me up, quantum leaps, have required a great amount of courage for me. Now, that might be subjective, might not be a big deal to anyone else who might be more confident and have higher self-esteem, but for me, it required me to summon a lot of courage. So if I use that as a reference, then I know that going there and talking to potential clients in person is the right move for where I'm trying to go with this business. Okay, so week 42 updates. Before we get into what we're going to talk about business wise, let's talk about what I went through health wise. So around on Sunday, I woke up with a pretty stiff back and I was like, oh man, I just have to stretch this out and I'll be okay on Monday. Well, Monday came along and I could barely get out of bed. It was real painful. Like I started having spasms that just made it real difficult to walk. On top of that, on Tuesday or so, I woke up with a slight pain in my eye, and you can't really see it, but a sty was growing on my upper eyelid. And to top it all off, I'm pretty disconnected from current events. So around Wednesday or Thursday, usually first things in the morning, get 5 minutes of sunlight. Shout outs to Dr. Huberman for that protocol. But I walk out and it smells like something is burnt down. So it literally made me panic and anxious that something was on fire near my house or my neighbors. But turns out it was the smoke carried down the East Coast from the Canadian wildfires. They say bad things come in three. It's called triophilia. I have no superstition or believe that whatsoever, but it certainly was true this past week. And this kind of foreshadows or leads into a topic that I want to talk about in the future, which is discipline is more important than passion. Because if I wasn't disciplined or had any ounce of discipline, I would have stayed in bed. I would not have suffered through sitting in my computer chair while painful back spasms were happening and trying to write my newsletters for my clients. But I did. Anyway, we're still growing. We're up to 1,841 subscribers now across our clients, so growing steadily but surely. And I'm looking and expecting to make a giant splash in that when I go to Vegas in July. Other than that, we're still going back and forth with this agency that we're in talks with. Hopefully some cool things come out of that end. It's looking like that way, so I'll keep you updated on that. And that ends this newsletter recap. I appreciate everyone for tuning in. I hope you like these videos. I've been talking a lot of shit on the manga author Togashi, who writes Hunter x Hunter, about how he bitches about his back and takes real long hiatuses. I kind of empathize with him this week, but I still got it done, so he still has no excuse. Anyway, trust the process, love the process. See ya.